Welcome to the NICKY OKOYE Podcast.com, and thank you very much for subscribing and downloading our most unique and most powerful material till date, The Entrepreneur Advisor by NICKY OKOYE. Entrepreneur Advisor is one of our series of exceptional, content-filled, empowering, and exhilarating podcasts, designed and produced for the 21st century entrepreneur and business executive wherever they may be on the globe. Dr. NICKY OKOYE, our anchor, is a serial entrepreneur, experienced business executive, and a 30-year veteran of building businesses and funding projects. He has also advised heads of states, presidents, and heads of global conglomerates on 3 different continents of the world, including North America, Europe, and Africa. His efforts at leading a venture from startup conception stage to billion-dollar status in less than 18 months is legendary. The Entrepreneur Advisor podcast series provides our listeners with extensive insight into the latest 21st century strategies for business development, investment capital aggregation, and global market penetration. In addition, NICKY OKOYE tackles the most pertinent issues while providing tactical insight as well as strategic solutions for building sustainable enterprises over the long term. Let's sit back and listen to Dr. Okoye. If you wish to engage Dr. NICKY directly, you can follow him at NICKY OKOYE on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Again, that's NICKY OKOYE on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Hi, this is episode 5 of the Entrepreneur Advisor series, the podcast. This is Dr. NICKY Okoye, and I'm here again to talk about the 8 game changers of the 21st century. And this is the 8 game-changing industries. I talked about the first 4 in episode 4. I did mention the information and communication technology, the disruptive, intelligences, the disruptive business models that are coming out of that industry. I talked about media and entertainment as an industry, and also the fact that that particular industry is growing in leaps and bounds across Africa and the rest of the world, especially across the emerging markets. I also talked about agriculture. Very interesting business models are being adopted in the agricultural space, especially in processing food and food-related items. I talked about energy as well, and the energy, I talked about power, and I related a lot of what I said to the African markets, especially Nigerian markets, because a lot of our listeners are Nigerian. But in terms of number 5 for the game changers, I want to look at the real estate industry. That particular industry has evolved. When you look at real estate from the past, you will remember real estate just used to be divided into, either commercial real estate or private real estate. And if you're doing commercial real estate, folks would be like, okay, let's build a shopping mall, let's build an office block. And if you were doing private, then you would be building either a block of flats, a block of apartments, or you would be building a subdivision where you have quite a number of semi-detached or fully detached houses, which you would sell or rent to homeowners or to folks who are looking for accommodation. Now, the 21st century is totally different. We're looking at opportunities now in the real estate where the commercial and the private has been merged. So there's been a convergence of industries or convergence of that industry into one particular product, if you will. And so you have a lot of the new developments that are being designed, even from a planning perspective. So a lot of city planners are preferring to give approvals for buildings that have all in one. So you're going to have the commercial aspect of the building embedded with the private aspect of the building. So you have some of these buildings, they call them vertical cities, right? So you can live in the building. So you have apartment buildings where people live. You can play in the building. So you have maybe a movie theater inside that same building, or you have an arcade games, you have swimming pools, you have gym and fitness, all in that same building. Then you can also work in that building. So there are office blocks within the same building. You have offices, you have commercial real estate space, like a shopping mall could be inside that same building, or at least a shopping center, a few shops. And then you could also have a hotel and offices. So it becomes a mixed development. And that seems to be the game of the 21st century. And what I hear a lot of building planning authorities across Africa and across the world are preferring designs to have a mixed development strategy. So if you come to them with a single development strategy, they're probably going to tell you to go back and rejig your model for something that looks more of a mixed development. And the truth is that the customers in the 21st century, the young, upwardly mobile folks, people in their 30s and 40s that are earning the kind of money that could afford condominiums or apartments in buildings like that, that is what they prefer. They want to live in the city. They want to have all the amenities in that same building. They don't want to have to leave the building if they don't have to. So if their company has an office there and they live there, they would prefer that option. And so real estate development companies are beginning to seek out those kind of strategies across cities, in Lagos and Accra and Joburg. Some of the new developments, all the new developments that I know of, are taking this model. But there are some opportunities for those who are not looking to put $100 or $200 million in a project, because some of those mixed development projects can be quite costly, and so that there is the drawback. But if you look at student housing, that is an area that not too many developers have taken up. And student housing happens to be a low-hanging fruit in the real estate industry. It's low-hanging because you don't need the kind of finishing that a typical high net worth, high demanding consumer will require. So the students they're low demanding customers, if you know what I mean. They just want somewhere to lie their head. In many cases, we're talking about bed spaces and not actual apartments. So a student apartment could have one room with 4 bed spaces or one room with 2 bed spaces. So students just prefer the bed space. Students are not looking to take on the entire room or the entire apartment, except these are very affluent students who have means of a very interesting income, or sometimes the parents just prefer to get them an entire apartment. Those ones are few and far between, and there are designs for those kind of customers as well. But for the regular students, most universities will be happy to partner with real estate investors or real estate developers who are willing to put student housing on campus for some of their students. In Nigeria, for instance, you have a deficit in student housing of over 500,000 bed spaces. And that is huge. That simply means that if you put a hostel, a student housing unit in or around a Nigerian university, any of the 160 universities that are out there, that particular building will have 100% occupancy the moment you drop your shovel. And in some cases, you could have your 100% occupancy the moment you break ground, if you are partnering with the school. So if you tell the school that you would like to build this particular hostel, it has 100 bed spaces or 200 bed spaces or 500 bed spaces, depending on the kind of capital you have access to. Those schools will pretty much aggregate the students for you on your behalf, and you could have a 4-year, 5-year commitment. And these schools are around forever anyway. So for the lifetime of your project, for the lifetime of your company, and for your lifetime, you will have students that are renting your bed spaces within the student housing solution that you're preparing. So that's an area of real estate that is equally growing, and it has a lot of potential. But in terms of the high quality or high advanced real estate development solutions, I did mention the mixed developments are the way to go. And then another game changer for the 21st century is, I would say, manufacturing, but I want to look at it from a different perspective, because manufacturing's been around forever, right? I mean, from the start of the second industrial revolution, we have been experiencing serious opportunities in the manufacturing space. Now, that means that there has to be a different angle to manufacturing that we have not considered. And what is that angle? The angle is micro manufacturing. Now, micro manufacturing is happening as we speak, don't get me wrong. But if we look at micro manufacturing from a community standpoint, then we could go across thousands of communities and set up micro manufacturing bases. One company, rather than putting $100 million down, $100 million in one plant in order to serve an entire country, you can take that $100 million, break it up into $100,000 units, if you will, and you could have 1,000 micro manufacturing units in every single community across an entire nation or across an entire region, as the case may be. So that's a strategy that has not yet been adopted. It's a strategy that is a low-hanging fruit, and it's a strategy that I believe we can advocate for the 21st century. Micro manufacturing, splinter your solution, subdivide it, go to the community level, and provide your solution. The only challenges you have from a strategy like that is getting, the right staff trained that would man these manufacturing units across the 1,000 locations. You offset those challenges of staff and maybe even power. You offset that by the nature of the demand at the local level. So the demand is so high, and you've cut out the middleman, you've cut out the distribution, you've cut out all those other costs that are associated with supplying your goods to the marketplace. So it's a strategy that is worth considering. There's specific industries that you manufacture for that lend themselves to a strategy like this. So one case in point is the education industry. If you are manufacturing educational inputs, so exercise books, pens, pencils, anything that students use, I would go with the micro manufacturing strategy, because you get your little plant closer to the schools, closer to the market space, and you can strike. In some cases, you can actually partner with the schools themselves. So those particular products that you're selling, whether it's the bags, pencils, pens, even uniforms, they can come with the logo of the school. So it becomes a joint venture. So that's a huge, interesting strategy that I think some of us need to take advantage of. Another industry that lends itself to the micro manufacturing model is the medical industry. The medical industry is huge. We have thousands of medical clinics across every single country and thousands of hospitals. So if you look at the segmentation of the medical industry, you got the large hospitals, you got the medium-sized hospitals, you got the consulting clinics, you got the consulting rooms, you got the dentists, and so on and so forth. All of them have aggregated spaces and different regional approaches to how they have been situated or sited, as the case may be. But they all demand medical supplies. And the medical supply chain is huge. So they're going to demand syringes. They're going to demand even something as simple as distilled water. I mean, the water that people drink in the supermarkets, which is either the distilled water or the spring filled water, the medical industry requires distilled water all the time. And so the suppliers for the water that is used in the medical industry has to be of a certain quality, and it has to be local. You can't expect to be carrying water over 100 kilometers to get to a particular hospital or a particular clinic. So it lends itself to a micro manufacturing strategy. There are quite a number of other things that the medical industry requires, and many of them need to be, in sanitary conditions, and they need to be clean, and they need to meet certain standards. But one area of the industry that I think may want to look at the micro manufacturing model is the pharmaceutical industry, where certain drugs are taken for granted. There's certain pharmaceutical, needs that every single hospital, every single clinic is gonna need almost on a daily basis. Some of these include malaria tablets, for instance. If you are in Africa, malaria is always on demand because that is one of the diseases that is extremely very common. And you're not gonna go through a day in any hospital in Ghana or in Nigeria, or Cameroon, and you're not gonna come up with a malaria patient. It's gonna keep happening. So they do have a lot of pharmaceutical companies that produce malaria drugs, and some of them even produce generic drugs, malaria drugs, which means that the effective agent has been developed by an international company, has been licensed to be produced in Africa or in an African country. So you're not importing the actual drugs, you're importing the formula and you're putting it together in your plants. That can be done at the micro level as well. And then, of course, there are less complicated pharmaceuticals like vitamin and these gym drugs that folks use, and different types of agents that just keep you going and keep you happy, as far as keeping your body, your mental health, and your physical, alertment is concerned. Some of these formulas are easy. Some of them can be produced quite easily, and they lend themselves to micro manufacturing. The fruit juice industry, so the beverage industry, it also lends itself to micro manufacturing strategy. You go into any supermarket and you can find a fruit juice store right outside, but you can actually extend that to a proper fruit juice manufacturing store in every community. In that way, you make it's a bit bigger than a regular fruit juice stand outside a supermarket, but it's not as big as a mega bottling company that you would find on an industrial scale. So for the 21st century, the manufacturing strategy I advocate, is the micro manufacturing strategy. There's specific industries that lend itself to a strategy like this. And I mentioned that the medical industry is a good one. The education industry is good as well. And these industries are extremely, I would say, accepting of the micro manufacturing strategy. And I also talked about the fact that you could also do the same with fruit juices or bottling companies, and then even water. Water supplied to the medical industry or to schools or customers like that. Another industry that I put on the list for the eight gate changers is the service industry. And the service industry includes all services. So consulting services, advisory services, beauty services. Beauty itself is very wide. So you're gonna have folks who are putting together salons, people who do the makeup, people who do the fashion stylists, and all those guys, or girls, as the case may be. So that industry is never gonna go away. It's getting more and more sophisticated. People's demands are always changing. Today, if you look at a pair of ripped jeans, if you had worn the kind of ripped jeans they wear today in the 21st century, if you wore that 30 years ago, they would probably consider you to be crazy. So fashion is going to keep changing. The idea of beauty, a lot of people have different ideas of beauty. Sometimes it's a specific style, a specific hair color, a specific way that you make your face up if you're a lady, and even guys are making their face up now. And so the service industry is quite wide, and it's going to keep changing. However, if you are looking at positioning yourself as a game changer within these game changing industries, then you want to look at the service industry from the standpoint of niche markets. And niche markets would be, for instance, the entertainment industry in a country like Nigeria, or a country like Ghana, or a country even like Jamaica. You have a huge growing entertainment community, folks in the movies, folks in the music, that require the services, highly skilled services of beauticians, of makeup artists, of stylists. So if you wanted to position for that industry, I would say go for that niche. Hold yourself out as an expert in beauty and style for movie stars, for African movie stars, or for African musicians. It doesn't take too long to build that reputation, because it's a wide open field, and a lot of folks are struggling to find themselves. Another area of niche marketing in the service industry, as far as the beautician and beauty is concerned, is the weddings. Every single young girl in her that's 18, 19, getting out of university, well, not all of them, let's say a lot of them, a lot of them have in mind that they want to get married. And so there lies an opportunity for a lady or a guy who is specialized in the beautification of a bride. And that is a niche market. You don't really have to do anything else, because once you get a bride as your customer, then you also get her bridesmaids as your customers. And that could take you an entire week of work. And next week, the weddings are normally on weekends. So if you focus on weddings alone, you could have just one client every weekend, and you're very busy, because sometimes these brides have 10 bridesmaids, right? And sometimes in Africa, for instance, they do two types of weddings. There's a traditional wedding, and there's what they call the white wedding, which I think we should merge the two, if you will, because we don't need to be going with the European culture, which is the white wedding. But who am I? But we do have these two ceremonies. And so if you are a beautician and you're focused on the wedding as your niche, you will be a very busy camper. The service industry also expands beyond beauty and fashion, if you will, and that could include consulting. So for instance, some of the services that we offer are considered services in terms of business development strategy or capital aggregation, financial advisory. These are all services. And what we are doing at the NICKY OKOYE organization, for instance, is that we are aggregating financial advisors from all over Africa in order to provide them opportunity to do business with some of the businesses who have approached us. So we're kind of putting the financial advisors together with the businesses. So that is a service aggregation strategy which we have implemented, and we are doing that already in Nigeria. We expect to expand that. And then there is other kinds of services. You have transportation services and logistics services and so on and so forth. And so that is the service industry for the 21st century. The last game changer I want to look at is the transportation industry. It is considered a game changer because it is shifting in the methods of delivery. So as an industry, it hasn't changed. So as an industry, it's always going to be there. We're always going to need transportation, but it's changing in terms of its method of delivery. So there is going to be a lot more ride sharing. We've already seen that in the Western world. We've seen that in the United States a lot. Lyft and Uber have. In fact, the last few times I was there, I don't even drive a car anymore. I just Uber it. I mean, every single restaurant, every single hotel has Wi-Fi, and so even if your phone is down, you're going to connect to the Wi-Fi of the place you have visited, and then you call an Uber. So I don't need to worry about parking anymore. Those parking headaches that used to give us headaches to you drive around the block looking for where to park all the time, I don't even do that no more. And that's going to just keep growing, and it's going to expand across the world. And so transportation is going to be very different in the days and the years ahead. One of the areas that I know for transportation that is going to expand and even explode is logistics. Because the more people don't want to do stuff, the more people don't want to go out and shop, the more people want to stay at home, or the more people want things to come to them, somebody has to bring those things to you, right? That means somebody is going to have a logistics strategy. So the traditional logistics companies, FedEx, UPS, DHL, they're going to need to change their model to suit the new paradigm of personalized logistics, which has grown in the 21st century. Some new players have already emerged, and in Africa, especially in Nigeria, Ghana, and some of these other countries, you have the last mile logistics being operated by men or women on the back of motorcycles. So they're called the bikers. So the bikers, take the packages to the home or to the office. But those bikers, which in the Western world, they used to be actual bicycles. In New York, if you were in New York, deliveries were always done by young guys on bicycles because they need to get through the horrible New York traffic, right? So in Africa, in Lagos, for instance, a lot of it is done by guys on the back of motorbikes. But the folks doing that last mile, that customer interaction, are not necessarily the same company that brings the packages from its original destination. So the packages could be coming from the United States into Africa, or from Europe, from London into Lagos, or from London or Paris into Yaoundé or into Accra. That's the larger logistics company can handle that. Then they come to a distribution center, and then they hand it over to the folks with the dispatch riders. And these folks are using Google Maps, and some cases they have their own apps that give them a full understanding of where the customers are. So I have talked about the game changers, the 8 game changing industries. What I want to do in episode 6 of the Entrepreneur Advisor is to talk about market penetration strategies. And when we talk about market penetration strategies, we're going to tell you exactly how to penetrate specific types of markets. There are a couple of strategies around that. But one of the areas that I think, before I go, that we need to consider is 2 things that are happening now. Well, first of all, we are plagued. The world economy is being challenged by the coronavirus, which started in China. Now, a lot of, on the surface, the challenge looks daunting. Folks have stopped flying to China. A lot of airlines have stopped going into China. In some cities in China, they're on lockdown. They've been quarantined. And people who have left some of those cities have been quarantined on arrival in the United States, for instance. They're doing a lot of quarantine for folks coming from Wuhan, which is the area of China that was first afflicted. We have over 600 deaths so far, and over maybe 20,000 people who have been infected. So it's growing and it's becoming a concern. But I think the big concern, which is not being mentioned on TV by the news crews and the television, radio analysis, and even the newspaper analysis, is the disruption that the coronavirus is causing to global supply chains. Remember that China is the production capital of the world. A lot of the world's basic consumer products are made in China. And if the products themselves are not made in China, then the supply chain of the component parts of that product are coming from China. Now, a lot of those supply chain factories have been shut down over the last 1 week. So, in the next week, 2 weeks, you're going to have a lot of factories in the United States and Europe that are going to start losing their supply links, which means there's going to be huge disruption in the entire value chain right down to the consumer. Many electronic products are going to be affected by this challenge because some factories have actually been closed in order to stop the spread of the coronavirus. So we're going to see challenges in supply chain. Now, if you were a betting guy, if you're an investor, for instance, you will probably be looking for those companies that depend on their supply chains coming from areas that have been affected by the coronavirus in China, because those companies are going to be affected and things are going to start unraveling in 2 weeks' time. So I just wanted to bring that to your notice. Another thing I need us to look at is the nanobots. There's some new robots that are being produced for the medical industry that are as small as red blood cells. Very, very small. Companies are going to be able to grow up and build up and design business models around these robots. So let's look at that and let's see what your feedback is on these two challenges. Thank you very much. This is Nicky Okoye. You can follow me at Nicky Okoye, which is NICKY OKOYE on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. It's always a pleasure.